Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. So today's video, I wanted to share with you something big that happened to us. As you guys have maybe noticed, in my background is a bit different. It's because we recently purchased a house here in Portugal. As you guys might know, if you've watched my previous videos, I live in Caldas, which is about an hour north of Lisbon. And we loved it so much that we bought a house here. So I wanted to share with you in today's video how we bought the house, our experience, and I hope you guys find this helpful. First and foremost, I wanted to share with you, this is from our experience. I can tell you, and I feel like this is always the case when I share this experience with other people that recently purchased a home here, everybody will have a different experience when it comes to purchasing a house. It's a little bizarre, just because in the States, I feel like everything is kind of by the books, or at least from my experience of purchasing a few homes in the States. And here in Portugal, everyone's gonna have a different experience. So this is not the right way, the wrong way, or whatever. I'm just sharing with you how our process went. So I hope that this will be helpful for you guys to kind of get a broad idea of house purchasing here in Portugal. So anyway, let's get started. As you guys might know, we recently moved to Portugal this past June. So we are coming across almost a year of living here. And our initial thoughts were to kind of search for homes, not knowing for sure where exactly we were gonna live. We landed here and we actually saw a house that we really, really liked inside the city. And I had initially wanted to find this dream home of a house that was situated inside the city, that I could also have like chickens and a vegetable farm and all this stuff inside the city. And I never thought I would be able to find it. And I actually found it when we moved here to Portugal. So after seeing the house, I was like, oh my God, I love it. But it was extremely more than what we had initially wanted to spend. So we then contacted a lawyer because there were some things that were kind of red flags for me, and I wanted to talk to a lawyer about it. One being, they have an annex there, which is something that we definitely wanted. We wanted a space for our guests to enjoy without having to feel like they were intruding in our space. So there was an annex that had 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen. I mean, it was a gorgeous house on its own. And I had talked to the lawyer, and they kind of brought up a few different viewpoints, and at the end advised for us not to move forward with the purchase because it was an older home and it didn't have heating, and there was just a lot of stuff that it didn't have, even though it was awesomely renovated. She just advised for that price point to continue our search. So at that point, we moved into our rental in Foz do Areia. And I know people have asked previously how we were able to obtain a rental and rather quickly. One, I do advise that you really find a rental when you're in Portugal. And I know that's hard to say because obviously if you're coming here on a D7, you're gonna need a lease in advance. But most landlords will want to meet you in person just because when you're emailing and you're abroad, it's hard to have that connection if they like you and they wanna rent their home to you. So I always advise you can at least fly over here, see the rental in person, and then sign the lease. And I found mine from Idealista. Anywho, so while we were in our rental, we decided to then continue looking for homes. And one thing in Portugal that you will find in comparison to the United States is that you will work with so many different realtors than back in the States where you work with one. It's mainly because every single realtor has their own listings. And you will find that one house will have like 20 different realtors listing that same house. So even though they have the same house, they'll only want to show you the house that they have, just because more than likely they don't, or usually the case is they don't want to share commissions with another realtor coming in. And it's not for everybody. There are different cities that have, like, they'll have buyer's agents and they'll have listing agents. So it's just here in college, I find that you won't come across too many buyer's agents, even though they'll tell you that. It's just more of a hassle for them. So anyway, I end up working with quite a few. And I was still looking for that perfect area, and we decided that we wanted to live inside Caldas city, or not in the city, but closer to Caldas than Foz do Relo, because, you know, our whole life is pretty much in Caldas. Other than the beach where we enjoy, we realized after living in our rental that we really didn't go to the beach as often as we thought we would. And we were mostly driving around Caldas. Our kids go to school in Caldas. We always go grocery shopping in Caldas. Any activities that we want to do is in Caldas. So it only made sense for us to buy a place in Caldas. So while we were looking for homes, we decided to work with a mortgage broker. And the mortgage broker helps, it's kind of similar to back in the States, where they help find a loan with various different banks. So what she asked from us was, she asked for our passports, our NIFs, 3 last paycheck slips, proof of employment, our social security number, and I believe a credit report from like Equifax or TransUnion or whichever, but she asked for Equifax particularly. She had all this information, reviewed it, sent it off to the banks. So when we found our house, we knew it was the one. We had to make compromises just because we came here with a certain budget, and then we found that we doubled our budget when finding that perfect house for us. Since we have 3 kids, we definitely needed at least a 4-bedroom house, preferably a 5-bedroom, if not a 6-bedroom, because we needed an office for my husband. We particularly wanted a room for each of our kids, and we wanted a guest bedroom. So we had to really pick and choose what we want to compromise on. And I initially wanted a lot of land. I always had this idea of growing my own vegetable farm, or not growing my own vegetable farm, but like having, you know, growing your own vegetables and having chickens and maybe a little farm. But then I had to be realistic because I never farmed before and I wanted to start off small. So it made sense for us to reduce the plot size if we wanted that many bedrooms. And luckily we were able to find it. And I will tell you that it is super hard to find a 4-bedroom house, if not a 5-bedroom house in Portugal and close to the city. So it was really hard to find our house. And when we found it, we knew it was the one and we were gonna move forward with it, even though it was more than what we wanted to spend. So we put an offer on the house and it didn't get accepted initially. So the owner came back and told us what the price that he was willing to accept, and we decided to move forward with it. So we told our mortgage broker the agreed upon sales price of the house. So she then went to the banks to get all the quotes and everything. During that time, our realtor wanted us to sign the CPC V right away, which in hindsight, I wish I didn't listen to him initially, and I reached out to a lawyer beforehand, but he was very adamant. He was like, and one of the owners was going to go on vacation, and so he was like, you need to sign the house, otherwise it's going to, you know, sell really quickly. Which again, in hindsight, I wish I didn't sign right away, just because I was a little apprehensive and I wanted to make sure I got legal representation beforehand. But we sent over the drafted CPC V that they sent over to us, and I sent it to our mortgage broker who has a lawyer, you know, in-house, and she reviewed it and she said that everything was pretty normal and not to worry. But there were a lot of things I kind of wish I went back in time and, you know, changed. So the CPCV kind of outlined our terms, like what we wanted, what the owners wanted, and then we agreed upon it. So for instance, we knew that we can close within 90 days. We wanted a house inspection done. We wanted some things to be cleaned and fixed. What else did we want? And then of course that we were going to put a 10% deposit down to reserve the house. So yes, so that was pretty much outlining our CPCV. So our mortgage broker came back with a couple different quotes for us. So we knew for sure that we wanted a 20-year term. We were trying to decide between a fixed and a variable rate. So coming from the US, we're so used to having a fixed rate where you know what the rate is continuously and you don't get any surprises, compared to the variable rate. So after looking into it, we decided to go with a variable rate, only because, so how the variable rate works, and I'm still trying to understand it kind of, but to give you a broad idea, you can look into this as well. You have your bank interest rates. Then you have the Euribor, which the Euribor is the interest rates from the European Union banks, which right now is in the negative. So right now I believe it's negative 0.5. I'll put it below what the current interest rates are. So you take your bank interest rates against the Euribor, and that is the interest rate that you'll be paying for that year, or 6 months or a year. It just depends on the bank. So Novo Banco came back to us, and one thing for sure that we wanted not to do was pay for life insurance. So here in Portugal, most banks will require a life insurance, and that is just an extra form of payment that in the event that you lost your job, or if anything like life-wise happens, that there is an insurance for the banks that will cover for the banks. So, and it could be pricey, and it really depends on the price of the house. So it could be anywhere as low as like $20 a person up to like $75. It's something that we definitely wanted to have the option not to do. And Novo Banco came back to us, as well as another bank, telling us that they didn't require life insurance. So Novo Banco was the one that we ended up choosing, but we decided to go with the variable rate, where Novo Banco was offering, I believe it was 1.2% of their rates, and then against the Euribor, we ended up paying 0.7% interest rate. So I thought that was a really good idea. So they then came back and was like, we got to do the valuation on the house. So they came here, and the house actually valued for less than our accepted price, which then drove our interest rates up. We were still able to obtain a loan, but it made our interest rate go up. So I think they then came back, and it was like an interest rate of 1.4%, which again, against the Euribor, ended up being a 0.9%, which still is great in the grand scheme of things compared to the US, where I think interest rates currently are 3 or 4% now. It's been a while since I looked at it, so I'm not sure. But we're also banking with Millennium. So I decided to reach out to Millennium to see what kind of interest rates that they would give to us. Meanwhile, I forgot to mention that our mortgage broker, who was helping us initially, actually was pregnant. So she ended up giving birth and was unable to help us finish the transaction. So we had our contacts with Novo Banco that she sent to us, and then I reached out to Millennium. So Millennium actually came back to us with an even better rate. They offered us a 0.9% bank interest rate. So against the Euribor, it ended up being 0.4%. So I had a gut feeling, okay, let's go with Millennium. But then my husband was like, well, we're already so deep with Novo Banco, so is it wise to then change when we only have a short period of time? And at that point, we only had, I think, like a month or like 2 months left for us to close. So I should tell you too, when we initially talked to the mortgage broker she told us that everything moves so quick, it'll only take like 2 weeks to close. Don't believe them. Don't believe the 2-week time frame. Don't believe the short time frame. So if you can, make sure that in your CPC V you have at least 3 months, because the banks will tell you anything and then not go through with it. So that is one word of advice. So when we had, I think, 2 months or maybe 45 days left till we had to sign, I was just really concerned about going with Novo Banco because, like I said, everything takes so long. So even though their interest rate seemed super appealing, we decided to continue with Novo Banco just because we were so worried about losing our deposit that we didn't want to start something new and then lose everything we had come across with Novo Banco. So we decided to go with Novo Banco at the end. And oh my gosh, it was such a headache. And in hindsight, I'm like, oh, maybe if I had reached out to Millennium beforehand, it would have been a smoother process. So Novo Banco, yes, did not include life insurance, which was great. They did hike up our interest rates a little bit more than what we initially thought, which was a downer. Then when we came across to closing, we had a date, which I'm like, okay, great. And meanwhile, we had a lawyer review everything and everything was going smoothly. So when we had a date, I'm going through the trauma right now in my mind. So bear with me as I'm telling you this story. The bank was like, okay, this is gonna be the date that we're gonna close. And I'm like, okay, great. So we told our lawyer, and our lawyer is like, okay, great, I reserve the time and all is well. So it was probably like a day or two before closing. Meanwhile, the banks were not responding to our emails. But I'm like, okay, what's going on? Are we still closing? Are we not closing? I had to reach out to our realtor. Our realtor is like, I don't know what's going on. Then he emailed us later that day and was like, I don't think we're gonna close because the bank then asked for another document that the owner has to get from the camera. And so we're like, okay, why is the bank not talking to us about it? So we were so like confused what was going on. So then our realtor was like, yeah, we are for sure not going to close that day because that one piece of document, which our realtor was like, I don't even know why they're asking for that document because it's not a normal document asked for, can only be obtained on Mondays and you have to have an appointment. And I think that was a Friday that happened. So obviously they couldn't get it that Monday because they didn't have an appointment. So they had to wait for the following Monday. So then it was pushed back. And so the owner luckily was able to get that document and then submit it to the bank, which then took some more time to review. And we were like, okay, so when are we going to close? Again, the banker was the worst. Maybe it was just that one guy. Maybe if I had worked with Novo Banco here in Caldas, like separately, it would be completely different. But this the banker that we had was, I think, in Liuria, which was completely weird. So then we got a different date. And for some reason that didn't go through too. So then we're talking to our realtor. We're like, okay, I don't know what's going on. We have to close by, I think, the 29th of November at that time. And we have no idea what is going on. So we were so lost that last month. We were like, I don't know what's going on. Are we gonna close? Are we not gonna close? I was stressing out. I'm like, should I reach out to Millennium again in hopes that we can close in time? It was just a complete blank show, you know? So then our realtor reached out to us. I'm not even joking with you. Like 3 days before the 29th, like, okay, we can close on the 29th. Can you close on the 29th? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I had to reach out to my lawyer. My lawyer has to be there. So I don't know his schedule because he's a really popular lawyer here. So I have to make sure that he has the time to go with me. So I reached out to my lawyer. I'm like, okay, sorry, I know I'm horrible. Can you close on this date? And so he starts laughing and he's like, this has got to be the worst closing I've ever dealt with in my decades of being a lawyer. And I'm like, okay, thank you for telling me that this is not normal because I find this so unprofessional that I don't even know if this is normal or not. And he's like, no, this is not normal. Usually it's a very like clear cut, you know, guided way of a transaction because he's like, this is like a formal document. You're buying a house. Like, this is not normal. I'm like, okay, thank you for reassuring me that this is just hopefully a once in a lifetime type of situation. Anywho, so he was like, look, I'll either be there with you or I'll have one of my associates be there with you, but don't worry, we'll be there to close. So then I'm like, okay, thank God. So we tell our realtor we can close. So the night before, I'm like, oh, can you tell us a time when we're gonna close? Because we need to tell our lawyer what time to be there and we need to know where we're going to be closing and all this stuff. And he was like, okay, we'll let you know the day of. And I'm like, are you serious? The day of? Like, can we not get more of a notice? So, oh my gosh, I'm telling you, this is kind of why I didn't want to share this with you because I'm telling you, I think this is just a rare experience. So then, I'm not even joking, like, I think it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. He's like, okay, this is the location, but I think the time is gonna be this time. And I'm like, you think or you know? And he's like, I'll get back to you by 12 o'clock. And I'm like, okay, are you serious? Like, you're telling me that we have to close by 5 o'clock, but you're not 100% sure. And that's the last day to close on the house. And you're gonna let me know by 12 o'clock, who then I have to let our lawyer know, and we have to make this work. So then, like, I think it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And they're like, okay, yes, it's for sure gonna be at this time and this date, or this time and this location. I'm like, okay, thank God. So we rushed over there. It was 5 o'clock. And I'll tell you that the notary which is where all the documents and everything's going to be taking place, and you sign off and all that stuff. The notary closes at 5:30. So I'm like, okay, how are we going to get this done in a half an hour to make sure that everything runs smoothly? So we find out when we arrived. So we were there, the owners were there, the lawyers were there. It was great. We found that they were running behind. So I'm like, are they gonna stay open? And they're like, yes, they're gonna stay open. So we actually didn't sign until I think like 6 or 6:30 at night. And the whole process at that point was pretty straightforward. Like, you had the notary, you had her, I think, assistant, we had our lawyer, we had the owners. The realtor wasn't there, but the realtor's owner was there. Like, the owner of the real estate company was there, and then we were there. So everything was super, professional at that point. Our lawyer translated everything to us. It was great, made sense, everything was great. And actually our lawyer told us that the interest rate that we got was actually a really good interest rate. I saw him like jotting things down, and I think he was now looking into getting a different interest rate for his house. So I wasn't too worried about the interest rate and our mortgage itself. But the whole process of buying a house was absolutely crazy. Oh, and meanwhile, I forgot to mention this. We had an inspector come out, which I'm so used to coming from the States. I'm used to having an inspection done, making sure that everything was correct and that the house wasn't going to fall apart on me. But I will say the inspection process here is 1,000 times different than back in the States. And I will say, I think the inspector here is from the UK. So maybe in the UK is completely different than the United States, but it's nothing like the United States. In fact, I kind of wish we didn't go through that process of getting an inspection, just because we knew the house was well insulated and built on its own. But it was definitely a lot more than we would have spent in the United States, and not as thorough. So it's definitely something, if you feel like you need an inspection done, then definitely get an inspection. But if you feel like the house is well insulated and everything feels right to you, I wouldn't really bother with it, especially if you come from the United States and have a different expectation. So anywho, that was just a side note. But I will say our experience was completely different than maybe the norm. And I hope that this kind of gave you an idea of how our house purchasing went, and hopefully you guys have a better experience than we did. One thing for sure that I would highly, highly recommend to you guys is definitely shop around to different banks. And if you don't want to pay for life insurance, definitely make that known in advance, because some people will tell you that it's not possible, but we were able to, so I know for sure that it was possible. And another thing that I would really recommend is looking more into your CPC V, because it does outline the terms of what you need and want for the house. Again, it's something that the buyer or the owners may not accept, and you guys will have to revise your terms. But I would highly recommend that you do what you need to do to protect yourself as the buyer, just because a realtor will tell you different things to close the deal, but it's always best to advise a couple different lawyers, not just one lawyer, but a couple different lawyers, just because different lawyers will give you different advice. And I think that spending the money for that hour or two that you talk to a lawyer is well worth it, because buying a house, especially in a different country, is completely different than buying a house in your native country. And some people will advise certain things on forums, and I just really, really recommend that you reach out to a lawyer just to review your legal rights to when you're buying a house. So I hope you guys enjoyed that rant and review of our house purchasing, and I'm sorry that I went on a long conversation with you, because I think that if and when I buy a second home, it's going to be completely different than our first home, but I don't regret it whatsoever. This house has been amazing for us, and I love our location. I love our house, and I'll go more in depth about our cost so far with this house in comparison to our rental, and I'll give you a house tour too in the next video. Yeah, so anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'm sorry this video is so long, but I wanted to kind of walk you through our whole process. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'll see you the next time. All right, see ya.